Vegetable Tamalaya.
Testele kan la kus devo.
Ah, Devoyin. Vegetable. Ta Kardanga to Derva. Gea Chashik den Rotach, Rva.
Very.
Teni Tate Ola Karrezena. Ta Tremba da Shivjeni de and Stores. Tanda Jane Gum. Ne Trambata Tanda Simjong Archiganala Yore, and a Shivjan that Simjong Archiganala, and Yomare. Ta Tedale Trembatans. Ane semjo nga chigana da mepi shivja ni na jane gombala ane memorongo semjo so yin ode ta jane gombala memorongo semjo so de la ya tramba ta ane shivja ni teret de yimbi jimsen kar zena ane lobo leden je ko oma nyambol na la ya ane ta oma nyambo zena de kashi token barwa de lobo leden je yo ni or token barwa na la yore Ane yikya lambo longdoa mubi kawa tembola trambi tabeng ipchane shirap chachi rawan chaze tekson yorez. Ye garla orezena ane lambo chen dirwi pedan jarne ane sonsha orez. Yikya lambo longdoa de yit zate suzu semche semji lambo te ane ngato lambo ndurwala ya lambo maramba dur matani tindi alambote mato sem da chibare didi sem de ane alambote kawa tembola ya ane tagore mato kawa tembola matawa ya na alamboche lakho mare de tena ja gato sem de amubi kawa ro chu amubadela ane tembo pa tagore te taya te tembe tabe ngi chane de temba de 아니 람보체 탁바가 아니 가와라 따 담바 나제 마초 무발라야 아니 셈데 담바 따고 레세 담비야 무발라 양스 코르네 아니 빈조고 레세 딘디 소다 아니 시럽 자체 라마차데 드니 시럽 그 탑신 라만다 지니 아니 람보체 자체 다 람보체 라마케나 자체 갈레 아니 고 ndrwa 아니 시럽기 탑신 라마다네 아무비 가와라 파타네 아니 담바 탑에 따네 아니 양스 아니 무발라 템보치아데 시브jen가 테라 무발라 데 요모요 아니 자라치아다 테소 제고레스 대시지
Şirap kiranten de sunguna yani şişin digi çagüre yani şirabre.
저쪽에 가시가 시브jen라 아니 야사안두 르바 아니 시브jen데 차kel라 야사안두 니차 저당 셰럽 남교 셰럽 그 아니 양스 아니 다 셰럽 페초타 로투 스타카체 제야나 그일 만타 초테서 마노 토라 된 시브jen라 야라야나 시브jen데가 자라체네 때 무발라 셈다 무발라 데요 모요 자라체네 아니 무발라 데메나 담베 양스 타 무발라 데오나 아니 가티 무발라 아요로 또 따네 아니 자라체 고레스 된나시 아니 시브젤라 자라데 시럽라 자라 니찬도타
Lasso. Ani kiran tanti gone kirante şişin digi semchunga chignaula duge marebe kirante de stagaran sunruwa.
레레
Naula yomarwa. Lasso. Okay, so the last class we went over the 11 virtuous mental factors and how they were associated with the practice of calm abiding. And today we're going to be focusing a little bit more on these two mental factors, one which is memory and the other one which is introspection. So memory is part of the 51 mental factors, as however, this specific mental factor of introspection is not actually part of this 51 list, yeah? And so we're going to be discussing basically how these two, mindfulness and introspection, enable us to engage in our practice of calm abiding. And so here I'm citing a verse, I think, of Vasubandhu. Let me just double check the name. Ligné, I think. Vasubandhu. So in the text of Vasubandhu, there is actually a verse which presents basically the analogy between the elephant and tying the mad elephant. And basically, this is an analogy where the mind is the elephant, yeah. And so the elephant is a reflection of the mind, which needs to be disciplined, which needs to be controlled, which needs to be tamed in a sense. And so this elephant needs, for us to control the elephant, we need to tie it to a stable pillar, yeah, or have it tied to a stable and firm basis in order for it to not be wandering around. And so this is the process which is done. The tying is done by we tie the elephant with the rope of mindfulness, yeah. And so it is mindfulness which is going to tie our mind, in the case of calm abiding, to this specific object of meditation that we're drawing upon. And this practice of mindfulness and of tying the mind to the specific object is a repeated process. Yeah, it's something that we go through on a regular basis. And then there is this hook, yeah, the metal hook, which you're probably familiar with, which is also, sometimes it can be identified as being wisdom, sometimes it can be called introspection, it kind of depends. But it's basically, if we consider it like Nagarjuna qualifies it as wisdom, wisdom is what enables to dispel all of the opposing or the ignorant aspects of the mind, in a sense, yeah? So this wisdom is going to be able to bring the mind back and to check and to supervise that the mind is remaining on this object. And so this process of analysis can be attributed either to wisdom or to introspection.
the Tama Down Mundu, check out my Down Shamundo, Sim Jalambo Yantan, Sim Jalambo. And Jibatan Jimmy, Givatan Jata won't talk on Karasungo Resena, the Shologa New that they chick them out the Damado. Sim Jalambo that they gone on the Chile, Sim Dalambo, non Jared. Yamber Tawa there, not quite Name the Tansha in Naze. And then Name the Tansha in a ta Alambo che Nyumba Kawat Tana that pe Ningata Shura, then I got him the Alanche Nyumba Najere, Kawatanja Kokawa Magi Kawakala and Jundo Red. Then this was the same Jalambo, the Tamla Tazen, and Mubalapa, Tembo Tago Red. And Mubala Tembo Tata, the Alanche Nyumba, and Tapaga Kawata. Changdo, Tenila Pataja, Najared, Tenin Jubatan Jemever Gurdo Red, Tenia launching Jubat Meva Najang, at the same day, a movie Muba Kawan in Nayana, Harkina, and that's also Kare, Jane, Mupa Zonyo, and Tela Tawaina, and Juba de Ondi, Dangato, Dochata, Jedanta, that the new move, and Juba Mombochi, Meva Chado Red. This is the Geva Tamche Laton, the Geva de Tamche, Suso Laba Nala Janaj, and a Laba Nala Tumba Naja, de Yungare, the Tili, and a so same the Amubaga, and a Harkan road, and the La Trambag, Ta, gone to the Chibare, and a Shivjim Charachin, that they get changed as a day, Tanda, and a Lobo Ledenje town, yet Chimojola Nigaga. Sonja or a lanchen de repeta Jarni, Sonja or it,
So now just to cite you another verse with this similar idea, this verse which comes from the Bodhisattva Chavatara, composed by Shantideva. So it says, but if the elephant of my mind is firmly bound on all sides by the rope of mindfulness, all fears will cease to exist and all virtues will come into my hand. So here, this verse is again has this analogy between and this comparison between the elephant and the mind. So the elephant is to be understood as the mind. And if we disregard and we kind of forget about the elephant or ignore the elephant, this crazed elephant is going to start wreaking havoc and running around. And so there's a great danger. There's a great danger of falling into the non-virtuous sort of side of things and engaging in non-virtuous actions. And so the process, the idea is again to tie this crazed elephant firmly onto an object, which may be, you know, in reality would be a post or a pillar or whatnot, in order to be able to stabilize the elephant. And here it's similar with the mind and in the practice of calm abiding, tying the mind to the object, to a firm object with a solid piece of iron or a piece of rope. And so here in the practice of calm abiding, it depends upon what type of object that you've selected. It could be the body of the deity. It could be any object which you have taken a liking to and you've used as your object of practice. And so similarly, in the second part of this verse, it describes how by engaging in such a practice, actually negative emotions like attachment and aversion will decrease, will slowly wane away. And easily, basically, you will find in the palm of your hand, like basically right before you, virtues which will kind of come about. Yeah, naturally, your mind will be inclined to be engaging in virtue. And so this is two verses which are quite similar in the sense that they describe, again, comparing the mind with the elephant. So these two verses which I've quoted come from Vasubandhu and Shantideva.
Tatane sema mupala pa ane tare sema mupala tere tinichi tawi jile ya ane ta nyinga da masona ane ani yongores jinwa da gopa ze nyinga ta semjong ani yongores teang kar zena jinwa chongse jinwa ze da karta ngama te ngel tesa ane ngato ngoto teche tara cheptang jinwa ze ondi ngato mupa ze ata jinwa ze kashi chikpare la ni ore te chikpare o ma mupa te ta ni te to jinwa ge gyucha de ore ngel ndo go mupa te to le onde sema ane jumri do di ane jinwa te le on jinwa ze ata kar de na mupa la sem de pa te de ore yana ngarcha yo mare kola sarcha ngarcha sem drumne pa ane njugo ma ka lolo chen pa maso mu nyeta mu pa de le on de changwa le on de tene pa nyop to do chi chene ta gom jag yo sam ge or da ngone chen pi mu pa la ta ta nje to ma ko lolo de o tindi de ka se chingwa le go re ta go ba le la re go ba ta maso do cha ka char to ne char to ba zu ye tong wan do tindi la pan chon do tindi la sem shor do te da go ba la ore tindi ta gom je ka sa ni ore te yana ma ni ku na je pa ane jingwa le wa chik je yana sem cholo la pan ro chon do ne ane sem da la ma ke wa o tindi ni yong go re ta tindi ni yong di ane tabshi gar che go re na te an changwa chong te ane lama ta give sheni soji yunde tande ane sem zin to gore soso lama inare soso give sheni inare tane yang kewa tamba tende gu yunde ya trene andeni tomna chimaron nyamne soso sem ya zin to gore zin to dena sem ya sarbo lozo gore ma ni kwa na je nyopto cha mai ba ya sem zin to gore to na ke gore nga shanen de gomba la tene jima ane yondan de ni de top thora ge shenyen da lama da de yondan na jang ala top thora nyamne so so to ke gore ni so da sem yaz zin to gore te ji je jana pa che te mando ta.
And so the next step, I guess, is setting the mind on the object here. Yeah. So we set the mind on the object. And so the two sort of points to pay attention to, or the two sort of situations that one will be immediately faced with, are dealing with a mental laxity and dealing with agitation. Yeah, and so when we talk about mental laxity or mental sinking, this is, some people think that it's the same as sort of being obscured or kind of directly the same as ignorance, but actually it's slightly different. Ignorance or this kind of obscure mind acts as a cause for this mental laxity, okay, for this mental sinking, for this kind of, it's almost like a loss of interest. You can also kind of, this sinking and this loose mind, and when we have mental laxity and we're practicing, we're engaging in the practice of calm abiding, what we notice is that our mind is not able to hold on to the object of our focus. Yeah, the mind is loose, it's floppy, it's unable to actually maintain a kind of a hold onto this object. As we're meditating, we might think that we are on the object, but if we check, we can see that there is not, we don't really have a hold on the object. Yeah. There's a lack of clarity as well. And so then we have the other situation which we'll be faced with is agitation. So agitation is part of attachment, and it's the mind which tends to move or which is dragged towards beautiful objects, objects of attachments. Yeah, beautiful things, pleasant things. Our mind is pulled in that direction. And so these situations, which we will be initially confronted with, is dealing with, in our practice of meditation, this kind of sleepiness, this kind of sinkingness, this lack of clarity, and the other one is the mind which is getting scattered, which is being distracted. And so how do we respond to these two things? So first of all, in order to be able to deal with mental sinking or mental laxity, what is advised is remembering the qualities of our spiritual mentors, remembering the qualities of holy beings, and also thinking, all of these qualities that my spiritual mentors and these holy beings have, by practicing and engaging in this, in engaging in shamatha, engaging in a calm abiding, I will also be able to acquire these qualities. And so the purpose of this recollection here is to make your mind much more bright, much more active, much more interested in the practice that you're engaging in. And so it kind of pulls up the mind from a kind of low ground, which is sunk down because of mental laxity. You're trying to raise it up.
아니 파 정화 세례가 탑람 되지 다 고바 정이체 아니 고바 제야데 제탄 도차가 차토레 주예 동화데 졸라 판촌로 거래 데 고바레 제탄 양화데 줘레 단단가 또 뇨모나 가르데 니뉴니시나 양화 제야데 아니 뇨모 젠다 왕게 양로와 베난 tumun도 왔다 얘나 ngakyen 텐디 세마양도 왔대 졸라 양화서 거래 고바제한테 또 도착 왕게 즈예 동화타 대졸라 파심쇼도 왔다 양도 왔다 델라 고발라 거래 다 텐디 고바 종이체 아니 녀무다 껴는 단 코로와가 녀무 코리 녀무다 아니 코로와가 껴는데도 된거 그래서 소소 단 코로와가 녀무된 코로와라 제타비 질이야 맞어 와 딩르제한테 아니 규만쳐버 용대야 코로와라 제타비 질라 제와다 가와다 나와다 쳐와라 소파 아니 딘디거 껴나 럼비진의 용대야 딘디 용다 아니 대스마 셈데 파철론 투아데 윤체네 나로 소소 무바 하르케나 가레나 텔라 테스 아니 때 토야가 아니 레바요레 딘디 소타 아니 코리 녀무탄 코리 껴한테도 짠네 무바 땡나야 아니 볼레와타 살레 시케르 테스치타니 비탈람바고르 단데도 지마치제 츠가 요미시 볼레와제나 포 무발라파 셈 델할랑 로치 무발라 셈 첼롤 투디비 갑던 코리 녀무탄 코리 껴한테도 짠 tani sem te lolo bore de sem mubala sha de te de lan do ane mubala sem sar lange do ane shikere de on de mubala te chita ne ba sem mubala ya te chita ne bi o tini tawla ya ba gore tini tawla ba ne de ta wi jane ki mubala jinchong che gore de pa jinchong ne 가제 자보 칭도 니도 던디 곰바 탐지 아니 장네 롭 토아탄 아니 셈발라 기초 당 토아요 말 바진 토네 ngato mate khorala ya nimare ke cheshi nalola ya sozo tiso gosha jamne tindi jin kyong towa yana jane ngune drovya ga ane rewa tama son hajang chenbo yo re tindi sonda karsa jane ten droba yana ane diwa lisen shinjang je dewa de ya toba yo re li shinjang ga dewa tang sem shinjang ga dewa li shinjang ga dewa top sonda karta gon shi ane li shingbar tar li pena luk de so pina je pa yangmo le gar gevi chola kor jana madeva chune me ba tagana je semde gevi chola kawa kor jana ya chi cholo la yang ro ta ani jingwa wang ma nyup to cha ro teni chune me wa o teni ge lisen shinjang dewa to re lisen shinjang dewa to mondi semde ani tongro jasam kanchi ja rawa to bren je 동화 파 샘델 동고요나 아니 샘대 동화다 샘 아니 자고요나 텔 자초초 오 든디 카르데 자네 톰네 리세 신장가 데와 토본디 든디 차로 그래서 든디 인디 리세 신장가 단다 리모로 트야이나 티 리모데 란첸 카르보차 란첸 카르보차네 파르 란첸 간라 아니 제동신에 데데야 신도 때나 샘데 소소 월을 쳐 단나가도 샘거 월을 파 장마 중에 샘거 여보도 차도 샘거 가티티노 다 샘츠 아니 소소 왕어도 쳐소나 아니 소소 샘거 가르치제 소소 샘 왕견에 샘가 무무 데리 차도 그래 데리 소나 아니 리셈라 아니 라와톰도 그래
So these what I've just mentioned now is is the method basically of how to respond with mental laxity. Now, I want to explore and think about how we deal with agitation. And so, like I said, agitation or excitement is a part of attachment. Yes, this mind which is moving, which is attracted to pleasant and beautiful objects. And so the mind becomes scattered, and it's always scattered in the direction of attachment, yeah, because it's part of attachment. Within the 21 mental factors which we saw, the secondary ones, yeah, the 20 secondary factors, we saw that there is distraction, which is part of that category. And so distraction is much more, you could say, has a much more, encompasses much more, because it means that the mind will become distracted because of disturbing emotions. It could be any disturbing emotion. It could be attachment, it could be aversion, it could be anything, yeah? The disturbing emotions will enter the mind, and then the mental factor of distraction will drag you here and there. But the mental factor of distraction is under the influence of disturbing emotions, yeah? Whereas here, when we're talking about mental agitation or excitement, this is always referring to it's always referring to attachment, not any other disturbing emotion. Okay, and so how we deal with this when it arises in our mind is to contemplate and reflect upon samsara, the samsaric situation, the faults of samsara, the negative consequences which come about in samsara. So, and this is a continuous sort of experience that we're enduring. Yeah, you know, from the moment that we are born, we have to deal with sickness, then we deal with old age, then we deal with death, and it's this uninterrupted sort of cycle of these experiences which are unpleasant in samsara. And so by contemplating these faults, it enables us to interrupt, to discontinue basically the mind which is being drawn towards an object of attachment. Yeah, it enables us to contemplate in samsara, enables us to channel the mind. Yeah, it enables us to you'll have an ease in settling the mind on a specific object, and you'll have the mind which is much clearer and more, we could even say, crystal clear. And so this practice of training in, responding and applying the antidote to agitation is not something that you're going to be able to acquire over 1 or 2 days. It really requires a continual type of familiarization and engagement in this training in order to acquire this mental strength. And so it's important that in our lives, we set aside space and time in order for this practice to be developed. And then there is actually a chance and actually the possibility to imagine that this is actually possible, yeah, to overcome these types of distractions. When one is able actually to progress in one's practice of calm abiding, towards the end of the practice, depending on the different levels, you will acquire what we call this serviceability. And this serviceability, or sometimes pliancy, or sometimes it's called flexibility. Yeah? These words all mean the same thing. It's a serviceability which works on the physical level as well as the mental level. And we touched upon this in the last class. So physically, this means that your body becomes very, very light like wool. Yeah. And it's very easy for your mind to engage in virtue. It will be kind of ready to engage in virtue. There will not be any kind of obstacles coming about in that sense. The mind won't be distracted or feel lazy about engaging in these types of virtuous actions. As regards mental serviceability, this means that the mind, wherever you send your mind, it'll be sent in that direction. Wherever you want to stop your mind from engaging on a particular object, then you will be able to stop it. So this serviceability is really referring to this type of control that one gains over one's body and mind. And in the image of a calm abiding, this is represented by the elephant, which becomes completely white, and the person who is sitting on it, sitting on the elephant, showing that they've gained complete control over this mind. And so now we can really see, by contrast, that we are much more the servant. We are the servant to our mind as opposed to the other way around. And so here, if we're able to train in this practice of calm abiding in shamatha, then we will actually be able to gain some type of freedom, physical freedom and mental freedom.
ane jane ji gumbi kyun nam nipa nga serwa ta fon de je get sangare ta de so ma che jo jon ka yo re na pa pa to me ga ane mari ji tsu cham go go win ta ta ane pa pa to me ga ane sa de nga te so na la da jane gum sa ta de so yo re ta de ni yon di kar de na ane
Kare papa tome tansu, son babo shamba tesu.
Jita chamba gobo, chamgo.
Allez, on laisse.
Otre ta. Ta tani nipar nga tan dipchi je de chiore. Jane gumbi kapsa ma ane nipa telar nga yore eze. Te tso nyembo tela ya ane duche je yore eze. Ta ti yondi jita chamgong kare dorde janga nala kare son yore zena lelo tana damga je tan chang dan goba tan dumu che tan duche te dada nipa nga do to ze nipa nga te son ja hore lelo damga je pa chingwa gopa ane dumu che pa tan duche ze nipa tala nga son ja hore
Okay, and so now moving on to the different these categorizations which present actually the 5 faults that one is faced when one engages in the calm abiding practice, as well as the 8 antidotes, which are ways to eliminate and to deal with the 5 faults. So this presentation of the 5 faults and the 8 antidotes is mainly based on the literature composed by Maitreya as well as Asanga. And so in the ornament of clear realizations, Maitreya actually lists these 5 faults. And so the first fault is laziness. The second one is forgetfulness. The third one is laxity and excitement. And the fourth one is non-application. And the 5th one is over-application.
Tene da karar zena te tso jane gombala nipa yon tang karar zena je somba da tomar jane gombala mstroi lelo ta jane gombala ya stroa meba jane gombala ya ane torna meba tene mstroi ta lelo te ane nipa chires kasa jane gombala stroa yo res yona ya damga ka net mupa jene muba maksarwa lama ga ne jane gum tanga ane dama chi ma kol ane son yorwa jane gum deni diri gum gore zene dama chi son yore da tene dama da temba jene ko muba kare zon go yo da muba chindi kyang go yo te to temba jene temba maksarwa chikje Anibatache. And if Sumbate, Ta Jane Gumbala Stroche, Damala Majiache, Te Majejan, Ane Gumbite, Chingwatan, Gubi, Ane Kyoan the Swaze, Tatini Yamdare, Chingwa Kyonda, Gubi Kyoni, Chingwa Zena Tanda Naja, Jane Gumba, Tigan La Najereko, Mupata, Nila Soba, Guchene, Ane Ma, Ane Mupa Masarwa, Chandwatare. Gomja Pena Gomja Wala Troyo Bache. Lama gom japtang gevishini de to menga ane damga maje bache saoyo bache ko yenaya ko gom javi kapsa ane chingwa wang de sone pia muba de sibo tata da jito mare muba sibo jema de semla ngarcha leo mare sarcha leo mare kate gom denaya ko tendi roji chane de gre tak chire tenir gopare gopa zayata tayi nanje dupin tsama ye tongwa in tsama ye tongwa tendi tong sona chape onge tela pa shordowa sem shordowa tendi yin sonza ane gopa ta chingwa anyi che tega ane gopa ta chingwa anyi de chik tsago isare ane chik che ane ndoma che pa zaya chiware tatiyo chingwa gopa nyingbo ndoma che pa zaya 다 진고 종이 테나 아니 님보 땡고래 진화 영위 때 템바다 시비엔 그 진화다 고바다 따니에도 소리드나 시비엔더래 되어래 시비엔더 그 진화다 고바니 용고 두무두 따 용이 갑도 아님보 더 무지 바더래 니바 자 진고 영고 빼나 다다 마토나 다 카테지 레오나 데라 카테 자파 아니 다득체고라 데 다득 마제 나메 샤샤나시래 Duma chezayate. Tendi
Kare na shinchiyate gondangati sima so kumati yonsona nishashana titabure.
Kuma yonda chikbare da yonda chikbare ngato jingwata gobani lewi tsena shi chara chene ane jingwata goba yungu yoba ta soso semla soso la tamba la da jane ane te mayonga tapshi chego ora pena Dando ji karte yungu na so mantu do ka da karte yungu yo na ane da de yungu yo ba je ne da du che go ran de shone de da du ma che je na me sha sha na je de ten du mu che ba za te ten di son ta ane du mu che ba te ane ko jane gomba kyo re te ore jingo de jane gomba ga na je che du mu che ba te ane jingo chong e te la ane anyimbo du mu che ba te la karte ma cha ba te ja sha te Tunin duce bazate karzena jingo mepam jivite nimbo duce baze jingo jiwada jane tese yapo chane jiwada goba leuyo mare leu me kapta semde shu dramne pa ngato zubo taba damde anaje tambo ngela zaza chene shu gomde ora mubala tata pa lone loshu che jago rez duce de karzen duce bazate 아니 마토 양텔라 아니 카르데 무팔라 tambo doje dena 카르데나 테 레옹 그레스 아니 카르데 인와 레옹 그레스 디 카브들 홀로 자위 카브들 홀로 자 시바타 아니 다다 카테 용 카브들 텔라 카테 조 시바 칸타 돔 자나 텐디지 고레즈 어데니 디 Duce pazeonde chitan nga sorwando cheba chikor sorwa kare barso kare che orzena jingwa dar goba mayon se sem lolo de kapta yanja barso ro che de na ya yinwa ta te le yinga ore tendi so ta te tangen ze gombi kyores te ane nipa nga te reze ta.
And so now to go through these 5 faults one by one. So the first one would be is a laziness, yeah, what I described. And so laziness, it basically means that, for example, you just have no interest in developing the practice of calm abiding. It's something which is just unappealing to you, so there's no motivation, there's no interest to engage in this practice. So that would be the first fault, which would be laziness. The second one would be, although you're interested, yeah, you have interest, you keep forgetting maybe the instructions that your spiritual mentor has given you as to how to go about meditating on calm abiding and how to engage on the practice. So you just forget these instructions. So although you're not feeling lazy about it, you're willing to do something. In your mind, you're not able to bear in mind the instructions. So this is the second fault, which would be forgetfulness. Yeah. Then let's say you are not lazy about it, you remember the instructions. However, there is in your mind mental laxity and excitement. Yeah. And so like we just covered, mental laxity is a part of ignorance, and it's this lack of clarity. And the mind, when it's filled with this mental laxity, it is not able to have a hold on its object of meditation. The object is unclear. The mind is not able to lock into or plug into, you could say, into this object, which is being, which is used as a support for one's meditation. On the other hand, the other, which is, laxity and excitement are grouped together. Yeah, they're considered one in the fivefold. They're one group. Okay. Excitement, again, we've just gone over it. It's, the mind which is being scattered and which is being attracted and pulled towards appealing and pleasing objects. Yeah, you're being, you're thinking, or you're being distracted by beautiful objects. And so here, in order to be able to respond to these two, laxity and excitement, one draws upon the antidote of introspection. Yeah, so you check. So you're checking what the situation is in your mind. Am I excited? Is there mental laxity? And you apply. And so this will bring you on to the next antidote, which is, if you checking with introspection in relation to seeing whether you have a mental laxity or excitement in your mind, but you don't apply the antidote, this is the next fault. Yeah, non-application. So this means, you're not applying the antidote in order to be able to deal, in order to be able to respond to mental laxity nor agitation. So it's very important that when we see, for example, that there's an enemy, or if there's, for example, let's say a thief, we need to respond to it. Yeah, we need to check. So this is what introspection is doing. It's checking, it's surveying, it's spying, it's overlooking to make sure that everything's okay. Yeah, but it's not enough to just check. You also need to take the appropriate measures. You need to respond, you need to prepare, you need to have some kind of plan. If you just ignore it, it's not going to actually solve the problem. Yeah, and so this ignoring and not applying, non-application of the antidote, this is what is considered to be the fourth fault. You're kind of leaving things as they are, although there's a problem, type thing. And so the fifth one is over-application. So our over-application is, although in your mind there is the absence of mental laxity or agitation, you still start to want to fiddle with the mind. Yeah, you are trying to, there's a kind of intensity in the mind in trying to fix the mind on something, or to fix something, basically. And by having this intense mind of wanting to apply, you actually are creating the situation of distraction, and your mind will get probably sucked away by a distraction. So it's knowing if there is no problem in your mind, meaning that if there is no agitation, or if there's no mental sinking or mental laxity, then you just need to leave it as is. And so this is, otherwise you end up doing over-application. Over-application is considered to be one of the last of the five faults.
다 땡기 니바 제 아님보들야 님본데 제 송요레스 다 단데 니바 나는 거 담보 레로 니바티 아님볼야 아니 시제 잔다레레레 제네 니바 제 송요레스 다 담보 레로 님볼야 카르제나 아니 라마타 출라 이치비 데바고레스 아저 개화적식은 그 대파 아니 대가르즈나 콜레로 제네 자네 곰발라 스토알레고 마르와 스토아 말레 손탄 라마탄 출라야 이치 기아예나 아니 제네 대소 연데 쟁그레 대소 연데 쟁온디 대연데 그 톰도 께그레 톰도 께온디 아니 텔라야 아니 송거와 대인 손자 라마 당 출라야 이치 대바 대고 그래 근데 니바들야 추도니 겐담바 te donyer je ta jane lo choose ya te tanda gewa je gore gewi chokola ya donyer kan dumba go re ta tendi ji top sona pena karde jane top ta ne lise shinjang ga dewa ro nga so top sona nyamba ta tendi gan donyer kan dumba go re 아니 든디 넘발레 차이 든디 추 젠도 조암 스토르와 호테고레스 아니 트로아타 렙 차이 질이야 아니 디빌리세 신장라 바파테 제네 곰발라 무토 레로 님보텔라 비오레스 디빌리세 신장라 바바 베바체 소로아치 tambo lama la ichi bi te bache ani chutoni yin dumbache ani chu chendo ji sorwache ta shi jaw yin da sambado ani lize shinjang la shin river tindi lize shinjang ga dewaji top sona nyam tela bebache chedam beba da sorwa de da chipan ro chire ina tanda di ka loka shendo o roam sorwach ani bebas realization jatindi top sona nyame tam besto chatare tindi gone ta lelo karte te chao gore tindi de lelo nyimbola ya ani ndepche jegana ge bjeson yores
And so within the 8 antidotes, 4 of these antidotes actually respond to the first fault, which is the fault of laziness. Yeah. So the first 4 antidotes which deal and which are the antidotes to laziness are faith, aspiration, perseverance, and serviceability, or pliancy, whatever you want to call it. And so here, we first work with faith. So faith deals with laziness by recollecting the qualities of the spiritual mentor, by recollecting the qualities of the Dharma, of the teachings. Yeah? And so faith is actually part of one of the 11 virtuous mental factors. And because laziness comes about because there's a lack of interest. Yeah. So if one is able to generate faith through contemplation of the qualities of the spiritual mentor or of the Dharma or whatever, one will slowly develop this wish to want to obtain them. Yeah. And then once one has this wish to obtain, one will be pushed into practice. And will then be willing to put effort into something. So this is kind of showing you sequentially how each one of these antidotes is pushing you into the next. So the first one is developing faith, developing confidence in the qualities of the spiritual mentor as well as the Dharma. Then the second one is aspiration. So aspiration is this wish to engage in a virtuous activity. Yeah? And with the wish that why do we wish to engage in a virtuous activity? Because we wish to be able to obtain serviceability. Yeah. This mental and physical pliancy. So because there's this wish which then arises, then there's an effort, yeah, which is the next one. Effort is the third of the 8 antidotes. We're willing to put effort to engage into a practice in order to be able to reach that goal because we've developed that initial confidence in it, an aspiration to obtain it, then we put effort in it. We put an effort, and we know that actually the effort, we're interested in developing this mental pliancy and this service or this pliancy or serviceability. So this progression, these 4, faith, aspiration, effort, and serviceability are the 4 antidotes which deal with laziness.
Tani nipa shanta je tiga re nimbola chiri ma to sonyo ma des. Kar zena ane dangwa jepi nipa jiwa, dangwa jepa tamunam jepe nipa di nimbola ya tremba songja gore. Tremba taga dangwa yang tremba tang, mubala yang ane sempi njuya. O teso ane dangwa jepe nimbola ya tremba che. Ani dai gong lu jua da chuban de re ani jinwa da goba gyun chongma chong jara che bi shibjen janggo yonggo do mundu nyam bi shibjen ge jara che zena ma zo ani ta che ta ni tawala ani jinwa da goba le do mundu jane de pa nimak chig na jin de pa jerin bo samlo ta na nimak chig jin ta di na lo la ya 아니 니마치테 만나 야나 치도 체크해 나도 치도 체크가 나로라야 정화다 고바 레근도 문도 시비엔 그 자라체고 근데 인도 진고가 님볼이야 시비엔다 랩타디 가르데 장 정화다 고바 용토 말해 지단 정화다 고바 용도 제 값은 시비엔 그 따체되고 그 용타서나 아니 람상 안에 파니 못된 거를 말도 윤턴에 용주자잖아 남기는 어제 차로 대 랍존나 마용헬 지장 지와다 고바 용토레 삼삼도 소소셈을 남토레데 시비enge 차라체니 대 용와라파 가르제나 님보테네 까고 오레 단다 진화가 니보테네 서데 담보 라마 당한테리가 연대대 기브시니 연대대 바 고바 총을까도 코리 녀무당 아니 코리 쫀대도 제네세 마심바 심로 지고레 라이바 어딘디 인존도 고 마총네나 아니 자라체고레 자라체니데 님보 라오레 다 님보테 십신 차대오레 십신
And so now the second, sorry, not the second, the 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth of the 8 antidotes is mindfulness, or it can also be translated as memory, yeah, mindfulness. So it's basically if one is which deals with the fault of forgetfulness, yeah. So forgetfulness, remember, is this idea of forgetting the instructions that the spiritual mentor has given us in relation to how to go about one's practice of calm abiding. So mindfulness is going to be this process of recollecting, of remembering these instructions again and again in order to, turn the mind onto the object, bring the mind onto the object, tie the mind onto the object, okay? And so the next one is, the next antidote is introspection. It can also be called vigilance, yeah. So introspection is basically checking in the mind. It has this process of analysis of introspection, and it checks, in your mind whether your session is for, a day or half an hour or however long your session is you're checking basically the contents of your mind. And hopefully, ideally, what happens is that introspection will kind of warn you when when agitation and mental laxity are about to come, so you're able actually to address it even before it comes through the door. Introspection gives you that mind space basically to have that awareness of what's about to come, and even before it's about to come, you're able to apply the antidote so nothing actually creates a disturbance in your mind, yeah. And so this awareness is actually come through this antidote of introspection, of vigilance, yeah. And so however, if agitation and mental laxity arise in your mind, you apply the antidotes just like we mentioned before. If you're feeling this mental sinking, this mental laxity, then you remember and recollect the qualities of the spiritual teacher, of the qualities of Dharma, and generate faith. And then excitement, what you do is you remember the different downfalls, the issues, the negative aspects of samsara. So these are the way to be able to deal with laxity and excitement.
Ta dumbate chango muzane te poya nimbo sembate nimbo duche pa hazat. Ta tai ganla ya chango chinwa dar gobani ayon meon tani shivjen de taje. Ta kate chanye te nimbo duche pa de. Nimbo de chinwa dar goba muzan tawi jile ya. O ande chinwa lep son. Ta ngal chinwa lep pro che du sambat wata. Yana ngal goba lep son sambat. 아니 텐디치 가자 아니 본드체 바스 드체 바스 온디 코 테니 카텔야 데 테니 아니 소소 길라 용 마토와서 용 마주와 텐디 드체니텔라 니 본드체 바제 데레 테니 다이 강로 쉬어나제 예바테 장고 제비테 무발라 세나든 조베 니 본드메체 바테 드제 타뇽다 제레 아니 장고 파 제차비 질야 아니 양jetwala 아니 셈 드름네 칼레 잡네 트니 체고 마레스 아니 고파 홀로 친 샤샤나 아니 타가란드고 드체 타뇽 제가 또 타뇽 셈 타뇽 제야 진도 셈 타뇽 제 온디 코 서로와 대화 지세 마지 서로 등을 지자 마지 소와 당뇽 제자자 소라 당뇽 차대오래 이나 니가주시야 당뇽 데다 당뇽 섬 요비나네 타마데레 두제 당뇽제 두제 당뇽제데 단다 가서 님보 드머체네 코라 당뇽 자자데 오래 드니 인도다 다테 아니 게데 님보 두제 게레 카테 차사텔라 니바 나요레 레로텔라 아니 덤바 카르제 테바탄 덤바탄 아니 트로아탄 베바 대초 아니 카테차 양다텔라 아니 템바탄 시브젠탄 아니 님보 드제바탄 덤메제바 대초 아니 님보 체네 카테차네 아니 제네 도와라 다 제네 곰발람 파르토체 오레스
And so now the next one of the antidotes is intention. And so once one has checked the situation, I guess, your mental situation, yeah, introspection checks your mental situation and evaluates whether attachment or mental laxity is about to come or has come, it's already there. So once you have this this vigilance, yeah, the next thing to do is to apply the antidote, whether, you know, mental laxity is on its way or if it's already there. Yeah, the next step is to apply the correct antidote. And so you need to prevent, either if it hasn't come, or block or impede or discontinue this one of the 5 faults which have arisen in your mind. Okay, and so this is intention. Intention is required. Yes, intention is required in order to be able to respond and apply the antidote that you need at that time. Then the next one of the 8 antidotes is equanimity. And so equanimity means that if in your mind is not filled or disturbed by mental laxity or agitation, then you just leave it as it is. Yeah. Equanimity has this notion of kind of balance, of a neutral. You know, we often think about the neutral feeling. It's nothing which is pleasant, nothing which is unpleasant. It's just neutral. But here we're talking about this neutral and not kind of fiddling, basically, not engaging, not trying to fix something when there is no problem. Basically, you just leave it as it is. If there is the absence of you know, laxity and excitement, you just leave it as it is. And this is what we mean by equanimity. Yeah. And so, as you can see, each one of the 8 antidotes is associated with each of the 5 faults. So I'm just going to go over that again for you. So we have faith, aspiration, effort, and serviceability, which deal with the fault of laziness. And then we have memory or mindfulness, which deals with forgetfulness. Then we have introspection, which is the antidote of laxity and excitement. Then we have intention, which is the antidote of non-application. And then we have equanimity, which is the antidote of over-application.
다 든디가 차체나 마소나 아니 차타위 질이야 다 무바데 아주 자네가 무바데 다 자네가 무바데 지르모체랑랑 침보나라 아니 데서제서 송자요레 캬베 무바 다 아니 케바 나버죠 무바 케베 무바 아니 뉴모 나버죠 무바제 대송 다 캬베 무바달라 비제체 당보 캬베 무바 코란라 비제 네 케바 나버죠 무바라 nga 아니 케베 무바데달라 nga 뉴모 나버죠 무바데다 아니지네 아니 제가 데서 아니 제송요레 대야 아니 다소소 간자 자네 곰바 캄다 무바탄 텔리먼다에 손자 아니 소소소 만다와 대차고레 다 당보 아니 캬베 무바데데 제가 캬베 무바데데 캬브데데 아니 무바 치마도 타마티나래 던도고레다 제가 전에 무발아야 가르잖아 소소 가토나 치바레 옛나야 가자 소소소 노바타 무바만다인 소타 다 데센드리마 제트 셰레제 다 담보 캬베 무바달아야 제트 가르잖아 남도다 제베 즈니엔제아치 nam to me pe zu nya za ane ngu bon tha ta gu ba yong sen ba o ze ta de je ja ore de je de ane jda nam to da che pe zu nya ze on di ane sem nam to da che bi ka sa ane zu nya ze on de zu nya ze ya de nga to mu shi pa ta na je de gong ge o ma re pe na la kan ro la ta ye na ta ke de so mu shi pa ton de ne ane mu ma tsam de sha jing do de go mo ye o ma re so ye ki shi ba la sem la ye la sha de wa de dan da wo ji sha ro re 그 물라샤 나제 학간 통대한테 다보치 일라사 데라 주니에 또 주니에나 아니 멜로나라 소소고 아니 동바 따나 동바 다보치 피 멜로나 샤가도 와셰고나라 데나신데 소소 일라야 타가단다오치 샤그레 데곰고 레조 다즈니에 넘버 똑바다 제데 똑바다 제바당 아니 똑바 메베즈니에제 아니 무본 타자 대당 구바 용스 트바자테 다 디오데 조당 만레네 치바레 구바 용스 트바자테 단 탈라 아니 자네 드브차네 고 리센션장가 데와토바 딘디기 쳇다 로치레데 타마니차 아니 코란 디 쳇다 로치 무자레 무방원에 마이바 제고로 카르도다 아또 리센션장 데와토비 쳇다 자네 곰바이나 리센션장데 코란가 아니 무바 차고 마라 데나이즈레도 무본 타타 구바용스 드바지
티쇼라 수수디기 냠렌치네 티쇼라 율디 다가란 디기 믹비 율다가란 텐데 차용기 디르
오데르데
So okay, so now once these conditions are united, these conditions being the antidotes and the antidotes which respond and which deal with the 5 faults, now we can discuss the different objects, the objects of practice in the objects, which are used in the practice of calm abiding. And so there are different objects, and the reason why there's all these different categorizations of different objects is because there are different people which have different characteristics, different mental attitudes, and different kind of things which appeal to us. We are diverse in this manner. And so the first category which we're going to look at is called the 4 objects of pervasion. And so they're called the 4 objects of pervasion because they're pervasion. There's this idea of pervasion because all of the objects in the practice of calm abiding are contained within these 4 categories. Okay, and so that, like I mentioned, the reason why there's so many objects is because we are all individually different and have different mental dispositions and characteristics and so forth. So these objects respond to that and are adjusted and in a sense tailored to that. The first in this category of the 4 objects of pervasion are conceptual pervasive objects. The second are non-conceptual pervasive objects. Then we have the extreme of existence, and then the 4th one is perfectly established purpose. So the first one really, which is the main one I'm going to explain here, is associated with conceptual thought. One constructs basically a mental image, let's say a hologram, a mental hologram of the object of meditation. So let's say if we're meditating on the body of the Buddha, or a deity's body, we're not using our eye consciousness when we're engaging, and that the eye consciousness is not actually serving as the basis to develop, for the object. It is really the mental consciousness. So we look at the object, and then it's the mental consciousness which is going to construct a similar representation, or we can really think of a hologram or a mental image of that object that we saw directly with our eye consciousness. It's almost like, the mirror and the mirror reflecting the image. The reflection in the image is not the object, it is simply a reflection of something which is, which is very, 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 very similar to the actual object. So it's similar when we do these images, and this is the type of conceptual pervasive object. Then you have non-conceptual, which means that it doesn't involve conceptual thought. The 3rd and the 4th object in this category are actually something which will come later in the other category, so I'm not going to explain them so much here, but just so you understand that the progression here with these types of objects are really in relation to the progression in your practice of calm abiding. So the initial object that you have will be based on a conceptual manner, then it will shift to the non-conceptual, then it will shift into the category of extreme of existence, then into the fourth category, which is perfectly established purpose. So this is really, just like in our practice of calm abiding, our objective is not to develop serviceability of, for example, physical serviceability or mental serviceability, but it happens along the way. So it's the same in the deepening of your calm abiding practice, the object or the quality of the object is slightly shifting throughout time.
Then you pate Jeba number John Mubaze. Jeba number John Mubatala Arngayo is. Jeba Nam Jogo Mubatar Nga. They are Karazena. That's so come the Muba Wangi. Docha la Shichir Kubi Kanza Yanat. Ane Murduba Gongo is. Murduba Tan Docha Shichimbo Yuni Kanza Yana. Ane Murduba Gongo is. Murduba the other candy goes and Docha Ganimbo Chade or and Docha Ganimbo Karazena. So Ta Murduba Gomtan de so Ane Tawane ma Gomne. Ta Kinru Rupa Tini Chad. Teo Gungor, and then ma gomne, then ma gum. Yan then pa ma gomne, Yamsu bar the pando, Yamsu and tapar the Tama Saja Tama Kirikon, Kinru, Rabal Kandeni. The new gomne pa, the Tane the Ane social drampar, the Tatani parts of the Mombo, Capsa, Ane. Oh, Murduba, the Tando Chakani, but the Kinru Gata, Tatani Karze, Zoo Murduba, Pena, Zoo Ruan, Nyawanda, Kato Murduba, Tatani Momboyo, Tindi Gum de Ate, Tando Chakani Bocha de Wores, Tindi Sota, Docha Shikchambo, Unite, so Murduba Gumbo, Reds. Tania Tanda took some gonna go, Jerdan Shikchambo Unite, Ane Jamba Gumbo, Reds. That's Semja Jandalan, Sewa Chedenio, Jedando, Lamsan, and Controsa Chochondo, Tindiona, Jambaziate, Gumbo, Red, Jambaziate, Sewa, Semche Tamchela, Ta Mato Semchendo Gumyoana, Tambo, Tanyum Gum, Ane Tijilaya, Ane Semche Tamchel, Ane Ma Gum, Tijila, Semche Tamchel, Chishan, Pawa Yetonwa, Tindiga Nambashaundi. Ane yung chamba de chao chalo. Tende semche tamche soso bu nansha. Chi shang ye dongwa. Sempa soso bu la nasan ro da soso bu la chi shanda ga chi shuya ro tende chena soso semla mazo pan ro tende che ro. De nansha semche tam chala ya nga so chi shang pangbe namba chang gongo re. Tende gom ya ye na yerdan de chuni tawa ne lesa yo ma re semche thamala tende gom to ye na Ani de lo de yang karza yang gomne pari simcha san tona yang pe yetongwa so la chi jang pangba ga namba shar de na ani jedan de ani rangshi ganga ro re teni so da jedan anin bola ya chamba gongo re ani ale ta teni ji na
Okay, and so now the next category of objects are the 5 objects which are enable a complete sort of purification or training. Yeah. And so these objects are particularly associated with disturbing emotions. For example, the first one is the disturbing emotion of attachment. So if one has great attachment, then here the object to meditate upon, or which is recommended to meditate upon, is the ugly aspect of of objects, and so, or the unpleasant nature, and focusing on the ugliness of objects in order to be able to respond and to deal with our attachment. And so you start generally on the crown, the sort of your skull point, and you start peeling off the skin in a way, and you start to visualize all of the bones which fill your, build your, which make up your body, and you visualizing this unpleasant aspect of yourself by starting with the skull, and you move down and you scan your body basically, and you make appear in your visualization all of the bones of your body, and you don't only stop at yourself, but you kind of you kind of sweep the entire earth up to arriving at the edge of the ocean. And so the whole earth and the space before you is filled with these piles of bones, basically. And so the idea is that you do this scanning. It's almost like the waves of the ocean. You scan out and you remember, and then you scan in again and you scan all of these different bones which are before you. And so the idea is that you're bringing to mind the unpleasant aspect, the ugly aspect, in order to be able to deal and respond with your respond to your attachment. The next one would be appropriate for people which are very angry, which have this aggressive nature. And the way to deal with, being aggressive is meditating and cultivating the mind of loving kindness. And so loving kindness is orientated towards all sentient beings, and having this a feeling of caring and this loving attitude, this kind heart in relation to all sentient beings. And it's very much, this practice is very much associated to the development and the cultivation of the spirit of enlightenment. So first of all, one generates this mind of equanimity, this balanced attitude, and then shifts on to considering all sentient beings as one mother, their kindness, wanting to repay it, and then finally one gets to the stage of seeing all sentient beings in a beautiful way. There's this, we talk about the generation of love, but love which sees all sentient beings in a pleasing manner. And so it means that you perceive all sentient beings as beautiful. And so therefore, as they have this kind of beautiful appearance to you, you really have this sincere wish that whenever any type of suffering that one experiences, for example, just like if it was your child, it seems unbearable. The slightest type of suffering is completely unbearable to such a mind. And you consider and you perceive all sentient beings in this beautiful type of manner. And the thing is that one cultivating this loving, kind mind, it squeezes out aggression. Hatred and aggression is completely pushed out of your mind, and there's no more space in your mind for aggression to be present. There is no more space, because your mind is completely taken over by this attitude of loving kindness. And also the perception that you have of all sentient beings is of pleasing, is of beautiful. And so this is the second sort of meditation which is recommended in order to be able to respond to people which have a strong tendency in anger and aggression.
Tumushi chemboyona ane tende gongo res tumuzeate ta ma tumde momba maripa tumu teshi chemboyoyana shichen kyonyi jina ane tende gongo res tende zeate ta tende ngato tarak mambuche yore tende zeate rakba chene gyulende kewa ngato pamale bui kewa ta jingale loto kewa la soba tende che te mayimba ngato yang panze tudo yimba tanda rangiba te to oma rangiba royena chashila tene takpa ngato gare na chashila tene toba ne oma tangiwa royena na panze tudo tende tamo chedang ngato gare na pa changma randa jen roju samlo tangena soson roju na jan la tude ore jan la martuni chitok chik tang ane pena karma khajina so choto mareze ya jab tabo taina mazo de desa khambare ane denre thonyare thama jansani yongore soso main be jansani tendi soda janla tende ore tendi soda tendi la samlo taina pe jan da hajang stawa chembo soso la jan da hajang ja chembo ta jan de stawa chembo tendi soda janla nonse chewata janla marwa chewata ane ta janla markiwa la soba tendi chete ngone samlo tana zawani marwa ro chu cha de ore pena soso so swala hajang ka chembo ta hajang chiti chegrwa so swa thama janla tende ore nga to thama janda chi mewa yena nga to so to koran yo mare tendi so ta nga to tende na pa tu de 아또 공산 초코이나 교바 태와메 바다 따와 텐종제도 텐종제온데 텐데 텐종다 텐데 직반도 지레 아니 텐종제온데 파 텐니 초대요 텐니 주고요 바 탕바 다더니 차리노나나 아니 추탐쳇 아니 텐종 베나 가와당 범바테 소야 파츠 두데요 parts to need up there. Ndi chade ore ta tangiwar ani ngato tumta oma de zoena yuen devala ya tu ze ta kajashe oma re tangiwan ro yana na yuen devala tu re pena me ro karda nyugo ro yana nyugo keja imbate yu sabonda de solo tu ore sabong nyugo kebate ani nyugo la ma tu ore nyigcha pansa tu tore de ore kuzoda songo ta temde tamo Tendi sonta temu nyembo la ya temu shiche ko nye temde tang tendi la samlo tang tende te tola ane tamu bachine gongo rez.
And so the next antidote is in order to be able to respond and deal with our ignorance. Yeah, if we are heavily sort of struck by ignorance, so the object of the meditation, which is recommended for such people, is meditating on having the object of dependence arising, of interdependence. So interdependence, this contemplation is in order to be able to address the dullness or the kind of in a sense, this this kind of ignorant mind that can be quite sort of dominant in some people's mind. And so there's different levels of interdependence that one can reflect upon. There are coarse levels, there are subtle levels. The coarse levels are going to be reflecting on simply the relation between cause and effect, the interdependence between cause and effect, are reflecting on that the child comes from the mother, for example, or the seed brings about the harvest, and understanding the causal relationship between different phenomena. Another level of interdependence that one can reflect upon, which is more subtle, is reflecting upon relativity, and basically the relative relation and the dependent relation that all phenomena have between one another. And this is much more present in one of the highest schools. We have it's the Madhyamikas, but it's not the highest school. I always forget their name. Just a second. Where are they? Here we go. We have the Madhyamikas Svatantrika, okay? So not the Prasangika, the Svatantrika. So the lower school of the Madhyamika puts a great deal of emphasis on the relativity and the connection and how the parts make up the whole, the parts being the basis for the designation, and there's this collection of parts which make up the whole. And so there's a study between the relation of the parts together and their interaction as to how it produces a particular result. And it's very important for us to contemplate and to understand our dependence upon others, and how we would not be able to remain alive for not even a second if we did not have this dependence upon others. We depend upon our house, we depend, the fact that we can sit on a chair, we're depending on our seat, we're very much dependent on, drinking. So it really shows how much we rely and we count on other people in order to remain alive. And so such a contemplation and developing an awareness of our interconnection with others really enables us to understand how precious and how kind others are to us, and how really an aggressive attitude, a violent attitude, an arrogant attitude, or a lack of respect for others is completely inappropriate, judging on the reality of our interconnection with others and how much we depend upon others. And we tend to think that our lives, our survival is so important, and our survival is truly dependent upon others. Without others, we would not be able to remain alive. And so it really shows the importance and how dependent and how much we count on others to be able to stay alive. And this is really something, a teaching that His Holiness is, really puts emphasis on when he talks about, the non-violent conduct and the view of dependent arising. Dependent arising and interdependence really refer to the same thing. Dependent arising is really showing, or dependent origination, how phenomena arise out, they're produced out of this connection, this interrelation that they have. They come into being through this interaction with one another. And like I mentioned, there are different forms and different levels of dependent arising, which can be contemplated upon, subtler and more and coarse ones. But all phenomena fall into this category of existing in this manner. So whether we're talking about the vase, whether we're talking about the pillar, they all exist with this specific relation between one another. And the different philosophical schools in Buddhism, whether it's the lower schools, they will describe, the causal relationship between others, and how the seed, from the seed comes a sprout, but we can also understand that actually the sprout comes from the seed, and there is actually a back and forth relation between these two. We can't posit one without the others. And so these are different forms of dependent arising to be contemplated upon and to be used as the object for somebody who has a very strong afflictive emotion of ignorance.
Tanda tu samga nyen botale teche tane ngarjer shikche kyonye chu ta ngarjer shik chenbo yonye chu sona ane kam jarawe te so gongo res kam jarawe la kam chobje za do ta ane sache melong jongwa je kam za ta kam chobje mu kam la so ba tindi temche te so ane rawe te mambo shu yo re ta pa kyangwa ye na jachila cha ong go re tindi so ta ane tindi sonta ane ngarjer pena ngarjer chembo doji na pena ngato demba ni demba jenro ming dang tranga lapshia na tanga shu shi son sam sam do ngarjer to shu yo na ane tele ya kam jaraw ye dang zo gomba na ane so ngarjer de ma cha do res tindi sonta ngarjer shi chembo do yo ni na kam jaraw ye gomgo ba ane 다나 제가 남도시 첨부 요아이나 운종어 공고와 다 남도 때세나 가지 미가지 된디 요로와 남도 람산 람사치 미잔다 콜레치 라브 영화 삼삼도다 야나 미잔다 코치 제탄데 코나 로 요사 마레 삼삼다 나 나와 로 요사 레 삼삼다 남도 다만다 네 양콜라 아네 치 노반로 제사레 삼삼 된디 남도 마로 쇼치 요나 마치죠 남도 왕게 세마케 바용고라 다티 니엠볼야 아니 우 용어 곰바이나 우라 셈타네 우파 땅츠 땅트 정가자네 페나 네 차르든던도 야나 차르니슈 딱치운도 차르섬도 든디 셈테보데나 남도 께 고르카브라고 마라 코티 파르라 남도 께 고르카 마라테 남도 땡가도 든디 조 남도 시 쳔보도 요니나 운종 공고레스 든디 손자 단단데 제바 나버죠 무파 나테 테레스
And so now, if somebody suffers greatly with arrogance, this kind of inflated attitude, the object to be drawn upon for one's practice of meditation is to contemplate the different divisions of the world or the universe, we could say. There are these 18 sort of different realms of existence of contemplations on the functioning of the four elements, and basically these topics are just full of divisions, and it really shows the extent of the subject matter. And so if one starts to study, for example, the two truths or the four truths and starts to think, oh, I'm so knowledgeable about this, and starts to have this sense of arrogance which arises, it is recommended to meditate upon the divisions of the universe, which are so extensive, and which will quite quickly kind of quiet you down and sort of deflate this attitude of arrogance. For people who suffer greatly with these discursive thoughts, this inner chatter, and with it's mainly this kind of attitude of superstition, kind of thinking of, you immediately have doubt, like, I wonder if that's going to happen, or I wonder if they like me, or maybe they don't like me, or they might start harming me, or, this kind of constant sort of superstitious attitude in relation to others. And for such people, then what is recommended is to base your meditation on meditating on the breath, using the inhale and the exhale as a focus, and in order to reduce this inner chatter, these discursive thoughts, because when you are able to remain on this inhale and exhale by counting it, for example, you count it 7 times or 21 times during this process of focus, you're not leaving any space for discursive thoughts to arise in your mind, and therefore it is considered to be a way to deal with and address basically these people which have a lot of discursive thoughts.
Tadini keeping mupar ngazach. Gang song so then keeping mupar ngate, pombo da kam down, kimche da, tende da, nedan nema in bala kever chepade, dan keba pombo ina pombo nga. Ozudan soat and the shit and the jet and never ship pombo nga yora. Come yena, come jobje. Mubayir you come of the doctor lots of bache. Ten wambu come che, mugan muta nawata nata che la soba. Ane number ship come, mugan number ship and tini come job jealous whatsoever. Ane kimchi chani to the muga kimchi down, the muga kimchi la soba, naga kimchi troop down, ane chi kimchi the doctor la soba kimchi troop chunye. Ane tende on the taina, tende deta, tende alap chani. Azon Koralan Korondi, Tende Alap Chani Gun Korora, Tendi di Tambo Marik Pane, Tama Gashu Partela, Tende Alap Chani, or De Solaya, Kebag Mupate. Ta Kebia Mubate, Neda Nema in Bachela, Keberchine Mupata, Nezena, Deva Ju Geva Sabale, Deva, Ane Yetonwa. Anere, Yetonwa Kiata Nere, You give a duna, Deva Yetonwa. Kiata nature. Give a dumning do yet more at the name my imbate. Ta name my imbate yoma recheta. Yoma rezena ane karzero. They were you give a dumning, they were dinger kia yomarwa, they were yet more kia yomarwa. Then they are neta name my imba, chimba, neta name my imba. Ta ane namie namdute. Labor shiba teso ane keba mubaret kebe mubatara ngayores no ter
Tamatila gena neta nema imba tiki susu tiki leje ki namsha chi gutsu ya dabu chi medro tijere.
re ta le gewa le ane devo devanjwa le gewa le devo dungur jwa te ane mai bachate ores ta na je le maggewa sana devo dungur jwa te ane che le maggewa sane devo devanjwa te ane mai bache o dini nami ya bushiade te ane tate ngate kebe mubaret
Yes. Okay, and now the next objects are the 5 objects of, we could say, mastery, for example. Yeah, the 5 objects of masteries. And so the first category within these are the 5 aggregates. Yeah, form, feeling, discrimination, compositional factor, and consciousness. The second are, you could say, the universe. Yeah, so there's these 18 sort of different divisions of this. Then we have the third, which is the sources. Yeah, the source senses. It can be, there are the internal ones and the external ones, which come into 12. Then the fourth one is dependent arising. And it's actually here more specifically about the 12 links of dependent origination. So you have, the wheel of life with the first link being ignorance and the final one being death and old age. And then the last one is, I'm not really sure how to translate this, but it's kind of like that which is a basis and that which is not. So just to explain better, it's more understanding that, from a virtuous action, goodness will come about, wholesome result will come about, happiness will come about. Yeah, and understanding that that is the basis, and understanding that, from a virtuous action, suffering to come about, that is not a basis. Yeah. So this is this understanding kind of the causality between virtuous action and and happiness, and a non-virtuous action. It's not like a non-virtuous action would not, thinking that a non-virtuous action would bring about happiness is a non-basis. It's incorrect in that sense. So non-virtuous actions will bring about suffering. That is a basis. So these are these different 5 objects, which are the 5 objects of of mastery, we could say, or the 5 objects of the one who has mastered, the wise objects.
Ta tamatera muba nyumo nabar jong mubaze nyumo nabar jong azonde nyumo pa jangyat nyumo mebazo ay chet mubaz karrezena nyumo sabo nya maba samtangze nyumo je sabo sane pong mubaz ta nyumo sabo nya maba samze ne ngato jane gomba don ane something ngujin ro thomne nyumo tesma chongri tanga chiorwa sabo nyam maba samze di ma chongri tanga ro chila sawane pa to mare sawane pa lao mare Ani delaya nyumo sabonya maba tsawa muba cheji. Ani pena dame pata tomba nila soba to ne nyumo yu sabo tsawa ne pangdo wa chora tsawa ne shindama sona tsawa ne goja ayina ko yangja kia yo marwa. Tanda nyumo sabo nyama tsaza shindama sona tesa che ayina yang charba tante li pa wana ko loma tate so ya kia yungu doa tena jire nga so yang chi nyumo kia ga chi kendo teni shar sona shar yo na ane nyumo kia yungwa. Teni roa la nyumo sabo nyam mapa tsamse pena samte nguji tuwa roa ta teni doba nyumo rejik pang jang teni pang ma tsawa teni roji la kore. Ani tama sabo tsaane pangwa te rachon bata te sogo nyumo sabo tsaane pang roa. Teni ya muba che ala ani muba che ne ta jene guma do teni ya muye la ja ne jene guma do nyumo nabar jaga muba a tsewa tsewa yin sare. Ani chabe muba zayata muba amate tale zurto meze tambo tambo chabe muba chinzo doa nga to namar toba de chabe zinye zaya chabe muba le jenda shasama ina ande tsole lokso yo ma reze kora.
And so finally, the last category is about the objects which completely, which have the capacity to eliminate disturbing emotions, so not completely, but have the capacity to eliminate them. The first category is related to the ones who are able to weaken or reduce the power, the strength of the seeds of the disturbing emotions. So this will be done, for example, by engaging in the practice of calm abiding. Or in meditative concentration, one is able to reduce basically the propensity, the strength of disturbing emotions, but these disturbing emotions are not eliminated at the root. Yeah, it's almost like if you're gardening and you just cut the leaves off a plant, the leaves will grow back again because the root hasn't been completely pulled out. There hasn't been an uprooting of the disturbing emotion at the root, but temporarily there is a sort of reduction, and you kind of suffocate a little bit, we could say, the disturbing emotion. So this is done mainly through meditative absorptions and concentration. The second one is eliminating the seeds of disturbing emotions completely. Yeah, there's a total abandonment in the second category and these are objects like meditating on selflessness. So it's really uprooting, eliminating disturbing emotions at their root. So for example, this would be by putting effort in order to be able to obtain the state of foe-destroyer. And so this would be maybe the intent which would be placed in practicing calm abiding. It wouldn't just be to suppress, it would actually be to completely uproot and to attain the state of foe-destroyer, for example. Then the last category falls in, draws upon the first category that we saw with these objects of pervasion. Yeah, so there's 5 of those. And there is, these 5 objects can also be brought into this final category here.
Lazo tuche. Ani ditsa tsasa tani dri zisha tani tawandra yona narona.
Okay, so that's it for today. Does anybody have any questions before we stop?
Caution means a ripach. Lazo tuche na samala taji dile ani jimanji yon.
Thank you. Thank you.
You.